Welcome back to Bros in a Landfill, where Brett goes to bat for middlingly received Marvel films for some reason. I'm your Brett.
I feel like, and I'm not Brett.
Welcome to
I'm
the Brett and not
Trybien.
Brett show. Whoa.
Hey, I'm Brett. I'm not so Brett.
We are Brett.
And you can be a Brett too if you like and subscribe this YouTube channel, Brett's in a Landfill.
That's right. You'll never be quite as hot as the original, but if you shoot for the stars, you might leave your house.
And this is all suddenly just reminded me of that Smell of the Game parody I recorded for you.
That was good shit.
Yeah.
We're doing a show. So
about
today
Marvel
we're talking
stuff.
about Thor: Love and Thunder, not Love and Lumber, as we were just discussing.
Yeah, who's the love? Who's the thunder? Find out today. Leave it in the comments.
Brett is both.
Yeah, I mean that was a hypothetical, firsticle question.
Well, maybe you can go first. What do you think of this movie?
I liked it.
Thanks for coming.
Am I allowed to say that I
everybody.
liked? Am I allowed to say that I liked the current Marvel movie?
Is it a controversial
Especially
take?
with especially as things come out about like their VFX artists and stuff, especially as like the schedule becomes more and more ambitious over the years.
Oh yeah, maybe it's like are
is
you saying
it
that maybe this
politically
is a
correct to, like-
problematic time to like Marvel?
Is it politically correct for us to like Marvel movies?
Is this where we have to stop and be like, how many steroids are in Chris Hemsworth's cornflakes in the morning? Like,
I'm pretty sure he just does magic mushrooms.
magic mushrooms? He's like,
I mean,
dude, he looks like that for an entire movie. Like that for the entire filming of a movie. He's like,
are you sure that's not just the VFX?
I don't
mean,
know.
if they can do it to Captain America, they can do it for Thor.
I don't think VFX can even convincingly remove a mustache. I don't know.
Well,
But,
VFX can't convincingly put a face on the screen.
I'll just say that I liked the movie as well. In fact, I really liked it.
I really
so-
liked it too.
I'll just give my broad feelings. I think this movie's really fun and really wholesome. Like, it's funny and silly to the point of like kind of taking the piss out of the MCU. But like it's balanced out by how much of a heart it has. It really feels like a Marvel movie written by someone's dad. And I just think that's really sweet.
Well, it feels like it's a Marvel movie written by someone who actually like really loves the characters. Because so much of the past year or so of Marvel has been so dreary. Like, good character stories like being told in like a lot of like fan service, but like I don't know. I can't remember the last time I had a fun time watching a Marvel movie. Like even like Spider-Man, No Way Home had its fun fan servicey moments, but that was a dreary movie.
Yeah,
You know?
I think it's probably correct that a lot of the more recent Marvel movies and properties are more kind of serious in their tone and in their stakes and intensity. I mean, I suppose the plot of this movie could also be considered dark, but like the presentation absolutely isn't.
Well,
Yeah, it is fun.
but I think no, but I feel like that's kind of like almost what I'd want out of some of the other Marvels, because like so much Marvel, like it does like these kind of like dark, larger than life stories, but and they have their Marvel humor moments, but I feel like this is like as I even compared to some of the other like Thor movies and like earlier movies, like I feel like it really balanced out that dreariness with actual like good-hearted humor.
Yeah, there's
You
something. I do think that the humor in this movie is unique, though, not just in like being present, but in the way that like it's something that I find really interesting about this movie that I think has soured some other people on it is that like it doesn't it doesn't take the responsibility of fitting into a larger cinematic continuity very seriously. Like, to me, there's something really funny about the fact that, like, you know, this MCU is something that's been built up over years and years and millions and millions and millions of dollars and like lots of time and energy, and then just to be like, oh yeah, by the way, there's a god of dumplings now, and he's canon, and he looks like a Bitmoji or whatever. Like,
no, it is fitting into the, like, you think of this more as something closer to something of a follow up to something like Shang-Chi, as opposed to the past few multiverse, because it fits right into the stories of like realms, like gods, like, which is a real part of like the Marvel universe. But the past like few years of Marvel has been such all focused on like multiverse and aliens, when this whole segment of like these gods, like you have like the whole omnipotence thing, Zeus, and like Hercules is like a big like I guess we're like going into spoilers, but like characters like Hercules is like is a big important character in the Marvel comics. And like,
it's not that I think the concept of having a lot of like a big pantheon is goofy, but the presentation of it is like, look at how ridiculous this shit is. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that it feels like they're making fun of themselves exactly, but like it feels like they're having fun.
Yeah,
to me it's good natured.
Do you know where like I think kind of that direction, like, I think it works very well thematically into this whole concept of love that this movie is dealing with. Like, there is like at the end of the day, like this turned into a movie that was about overcoming grief and the darkness that can overconsume you or overwhelm you, and like I feel like a more toned down movie wouldn't have sold that idea very well.
Yeah, I can agree with you, because you need the levity and light in this movie for there to be something to overcome the darkness with, I guess you could say.
Because also it was a movie about like, oh, we gotta convince Gore not to kill all the gods at the very end. It was also a movie where Thor is this character who's lost. Like, he's lost so much. He's like in this denial. He's like in like this dude bro sort of phase where he's just throwing caution to the wind. Like, he's comedic. Like, he plays into that like himbo character. Because like not taking any responsibility. You see that right from the start. Like, he is a chaotic mess at the start of the movie. And the whole arc for him is finding responsibility, where Gore is this is like kind of the opposite of that, where Gore is this character where he's acting on this sense of like over responsibility. He's like, oh, like, I've been hurt by the gods are going to hurt everybody else, I've got to kill all the gods. But like, he's so over consumed with responsibility that he's blinded to the things he actually cares about.
Yeah, to what his actual needs are.
Yeah, so like where the movie ends up going is that like it ends up like meeting these two characters in the middle, where Thor cares a lot about people, but he shuts himself off from others because he cares too much. And by opening himself up, being like, no, I got to take responsibility for those that I care about, he's able to convince Gore to be like, you got to focus on the people you care about. Sort of.
Well, that's a pretty good like underlining of the sort of character relationship, and just like the kind of through line of the movie. And yeah, for me that really worked. I've watched I watched one other review of this before we're doing our one. I've talked to some of my friends, and like, I think for some people they felt like the sort of relentless silliness of the movie maybe took them out of those themes. But like, for me, yeah, I think it all works in tandem. I think it creates something that's really sweet. And like,
yeah,
I think for some people there are certain elements of the story that are like, they're so irreverent that like, it breaks their immersion a little bit. Like, okay, so there's a scene. If we're in spoiler territory, obviously we just talked about the main two characters and their relationship. But so assuming that we're there, there's a part near the end of the movie where Thor just emboldens all these kids with Thor's powers. And personally, I thought it was great.
Yeah, no,
I understand
I would have hated that scene in any other movie, but I feel like that really worked with Thor.
Yeah, I feel like if you vibe with the charisma and energy of the movie, then I think you won't mind it. But like, because I can totally see the argument that like, okay, has Thor always been able to do that, or could he have done? Maybe it was pulled out of nowhere, or could he have just done that against Thanos or whatever? Like, but I feel like it's kind of that almost feels like missing the point of like. Like this is kind of what I'm talking about, where like I feel like this movie is a bit irreverent about how it fits exactly into pre-established films. But like for me, I think I've had a really good time with all the recent Marvel stuff because I've just gone in accepting that it's its own thing. It's its own piece of art that can make its own decisions and isn't shackled to the MCU, but it uses it as a starting point. And that like when I watch other movies, I know that like I'm just gonna allow my suspension of disbelief to take over because I know something like Thor: Love and Thunder happened.
Can I use a really good counter example for me with this one?
Sure.
Like, because I think there was a recent Marvel movie with an equally sort of ridiculous sort of concept that you liked at the time. Like I was like met on. Was the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness music note battle.
Oh, yeah.
Where I feel like where that just kind of like felt like I think there was something interesting thematic stuff with that scene, but I feel like it was really weird and unnecessary, especially given the repertoire of both Doctor Strange and this alternate version of him, like the amount of magic they could do. Like for that to have been the choice. Like,
no, I agree.
It's not like,
I think if you're going to go that far outside of like what feels like should reasonably happen, like you better have like a reason for it. And I feel like in Thor, it's like it's part of the overall kind of heart of the movie.
Like and not just that. I feel like you have a bit of like you can have the cop out answer of he has this different weapon which is Zeus's lightning bolt, which you could cop out and say, he's able to do that because he has this thing that Zeus can do with this thing.
Yeah.
And that explains why he hasn't done it before. He doesn't really have any other options because there's only the kids there. There's this army of things coming. It's a ridiculous concept, and theoretically the writers could have written whatever they want. But given the setup and considering the character Thor, it doesn't feel out of character for him, especially if he knows he can do this thing.
Yeah, I think... Is it a contrived scenario? Sure, but it's not impossible.
A lot of Marvel.
Yeah, I think
much of Marvel is contrived. Like even in the comic books, there's so much contrived nonsense in there, and that's part of the charm.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't really know how to make an argument really for someone who doesn't like this movie that much because I think it's like you vibe with it or you don't. Because it's so much fun, and there's goats screaming for the entire film.
I think a lot of the people who go into like something like Thor or Doctor Strange or whatever, like they're viewing current Marvel like they viewed older MCU, because like in phases 2 and 3 you could really see those phases as like they're as big arcs, like everything was connected. Like it didn't really feel like just one movie at that time. But now we're back in phase 4, which is the start of a new saga, which we're kind of back into phase 1 in terms of the storytelling, where it's kind of just a mishmash of different things setting things up for the later phases. So, and they're being really creative, like they're being incredibly creative and experimental with this phase. And I think that's been a very good thing that they haven't been able to do in phases 2 and 3, which were a lot more constrained, being the mid.
Yeah, because they had to go somewhere. They had to build somewhere. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I do think people are expecting the same kind of yes and that the previous stuff did, rather than just and. And I think there's probably an argument to be made that it could do a better job being a little bit more cohesive. But personally, like I've enjoyed this phase for what it is, where they're just making a bunch of fun movies that like don't have too much relation to each other, and I hope it starts building somewhere. But like, yeah,
I genuinely think I genuinely think that like 5 years from now, after like Avengers 5 and 6, people will be looking back to some of these earlier movies, and after some of these spin-offs, like because like you have these end credit scenes of this movie where you have like Hercules, like being like, oh, we got to take care of Thor, and then you have like the second end credit scene with Jane and stuff, and then you have all these other things up, like you have like Thor being a dad, like a surrogate dad to Love, even like with a Multiverse of Madness, it's like you have whatever, like since I'm curious what they're gonna do with Scarlet Witch, because either she can be dead or she can be dead but in one of the afterlife realms. Like there's a lot like being set up now that people aren't seeing the connected scenes, but there are clearly things being set up if you're paying attention, like between all the movies. And I feel like if they can get those payoffs to work in the later phases of this multiverse saga, I do feel like people will be looking back to these earlier phases and seeing these movies in a better light.
I hope so. I do hope they can take it somewhere that justifies it. But even then, like if it is just a bunch of kind of somewhat disconnected things and only some of it really matters going forward, I still liked all the things that I saw.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's like I feel like so many people got into Marvel during Phase 3, especially with like bangers like Black Panther, and then like Infinity War and Endgame were like these huge, like
they're fucking
cinematic
events,
things.
yeah.
Like so, like Phase, like when I started watching like Marvel, like Phase 1 and Phase 2, they were kind of big deals, but no one was like taking them super seriously. Then like Guardians of the Galaxy comes out. Suddenly there's more like public attention towards it, because Guardians of the Galaxy was just a great movie, and then be like a good both kids movie, but a lot to enjoy for parents.
It's also like one of the ones that is not like just directly a superhero movie. Like it's like an adventure movie. It kind of broadens what you can do with the films.
Well, it really brought in that space crowd too. Like that's and as like people learn, like, oh, this isn't just like silly superheroes. This is big like intergalactic. It was basically an intergalactic soap opera, like space opera for the whole like first 3 phases. And then like you had a lot of people coming in late Phase 2, early Phase 3 with this expectation of what Marvel is. Where I'm going back to thinking about Marvel Phase 1, and that was literally just a bunch of hodgepodge of stories that end of movie, Nick Fury comes up being like, yo, want to join the Avengers? And then we had this big movie against Loki at the end. But there wasn't a lot of connecting tissue there, where Phase 3 was incredible in terms of interweaving the different heroes, working in this like Infinity Stones into these different movies. Because like there was a lot more you could do with the Infinity Stones to set up this long arc of work, and you can follow these stones from like movie to movie and see how like,
looking back, it's quite a meticulous development, and that is really cool about it. But I'm with this new stuff, I'm willing just to see where it goes, but it's definitely not that meticulous setup. It's like they're at least like they've put some effort into building up the concept of both different universes and different timelines. Like at least thematically, that kind of makes sense. They're moving things onto a new generation of heroes.
Yeah.
So there is stuff happening.
I don't think it hasn't been meticulous. Just the scope of this next phase has been so much larger that it's harder to see the connecting dots. But if you're looking at this as like the first act of a 3-act structure, like there is so many interesting things they are setting up that they can explore. Now, whether they explore it or not, that's up to them. But yeah, it's like we got a bunch of new young heroes that will be growing up the next 5 years in like these movies. We have like
so many seeds planted.
Yeah, we got all these different like realms being introduced, both like with both gods, and then we have like these afterlives from like these different movies. Then we have like this whole like multiverse setup with these different rules for the multiverse. And it's a lot. It is absolutely a lot, and I definitely see why it can feel like it's a it doesn't feel very connected.
But yeah, I think you're right. It is like a massive, massive story they're going for, where like the scope is ridiculous.
And it's
yeah,
and like, and given that like the big finale is going to be like these two Avengers movies that are like these huge multiversal, like, I don't know, like, who knows like how big they're going to end up being. Like, there's given like the scope of just the idea of something like a multiverse for those like phase 6 payoffs, there has to be so much groundwork laid. Otherwise it'll just feel like another, like, otherwise it'll feel like what Multiverse of Madness ended up feeling like as a multiverse, because people expected Multiverse of Madness to be like the big Avengers massive multiverse thing, but it didn't have any of the groundwork to be able to like make that big satisfying conclusion.
You do have to make these things matter. Like, it's a pretty different context in 2022. Like, back when the Avengers came out, like, the idea of doing just the fact that all these different characters were in the same movie now was crazy. And like, or like doing a really long series of films like Harry Potter was like crazy. But now, like, I mean, we were just talking about multiverses where like fucking Shaggy and Batman and Adventure Time are like all running around together. It's like the concept of a crossover is like it's reached like the singularity. So like
yeah,
they have to just making characters exist in the same movie anymore kind of isn't really enough.
Yeah, but and it's not just that, it's also the whole other side of things with like production, like budgets, like
whipping VFX artists.
Yeah, whipping VFX. But like even like what makes those big crossover movies so hard already is that you have all these big name actors with these huge paychecks that like that eat into like how much of Avengers Endgame's like cost just went into those like big list actors.
It is crazy because like you have to like these movies are part of what make these actors big, but now that they're big, it's like our film universe, like this huge, ridiculously complicated, massive, sprawling universe, like it requires actor B to like he has to be here or we're fucked, you know.
And a lot of ways, not to sound cynical, like I kind of get why they're starting to introduce like these younger actor characters, like they're not going to cost as much as like a Robert Downey Jr. Like every movie they're in, they're going to cost a fraction of what each big list actor.
At least for a while, like but you know, like Iron
like,
Man was such
like,
a huge role
like,
for Robert Downey Jr. though, and then like he just grew into being their fucking.
But part of that's also going to be like they're still like they're not going to be like in their 20s and whatnot in like 30s and have like they might be becoming A-list actors through these roles, but their cost and their paycheck isn't going to be the same as like legacy actors, because Robert Downey Jr. was already sort of a legacy actor at the point. He was at a dip in his career and Iron Man revived that, but he was already a big name actor at that point. So like when we get down to Avengers 5 and 6, they can't, those movies like in the eyes of Marvel and Disney and the fans, they have to be more exciting than Endgame and Infinity War. Like they've by continuing the series, they have ridden themselves in a budget, like in a monetary budget hole, where when they conclude this next arc, if it doesn't do better than Endgame and Infinity War, like that begs a question for them if they're going to continue on making MCU movies. But MCU movies are such a big cash grab; it needs to be profitable forever.
It is an interesting question, like, well, just an interesting thing to bring up. By the way, we should probably rename this video to Thor 4 and MCU discussion. But not that I have a problem with that. It is an interesting question, like, how long can it go on? Like, they've just shown out their roadmap for the next, like, several years, but, like, you know, it's pretty crazy that we even got this far. Like, this isn't this is a massive
Well, not
multiverse of movies, and like something that I think is interesting is that a lot of the young, a lot of the kids and young teenagers and stuff watching Marvel movies now, arguably the target audience for something like this, they weren't even fucking around for Iron Man or
there are over
Hulk
30 movies. There are over 30 movies in this franchise, and that's not even including like the Disney Plus series.
Yeah, I'm like, how old will I be when this all stops?
If it stops.
Yeah, will it stop? What?
'Cause
Like, it seems like they could just keep the rope going for a long time.
Well, I mean, there's like very two interesting sides to this. One, Disney, and if Disney sees a profitable franchise, they will milk it to the end of time. The other thing too is that because these are all movies based off of comics and whatnot, but because of but because the movie cycle takes longer than the comic production cycle, there is a theoretically an infinite amount of content they can make and base off. Like they're already using the comics, like in the past 10 years, they were already using comics to test the water for different stories to put into stuff. And now we are seeing stories and adaptations of stuff from things written after the first Iron Man movie was made.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like,
so they're not gonna. It's not like they're gonna run out of material. I mean, even if there were no comics left, they would just make up some new shit. But
well, they don't need the comics to be profitable anymore. They just need the comics to be a testing ground because the movies are what make the most of the money.
It is quite interesting that these are like comic book characters, but like to most of the world, they're movie characters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like it's crazy how I mean, comics are not a very mainstream entertainment medium.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that they've ever been, but now they're like so overshadowed by something based on them. I just think that's interesting.
I mean, like I can see like over time, like comics becoming a bit more mainstream as the digital market becomes more and more accessible, and as younger people grow up with these characters.
Yeah,
but like I can definitely already see at this point that this isn't Marvel's first priority. The comics aren't Marvel or even DC's first priority at this point. Like it's mostly just capital.
Like the old heads, yeah.
Really, at this point, they're just there to say that we base it off a comic.
I guess so.
Heck, even look at like Warner Brothers with things like Mortal Kombat. Like before before Mortal Kombat 11 came out, they had this whole comic series on Mortal Kombat 11, and like same thing like with Injustice and 10, and
yeah, comics
all
are
that stuff.
They make sense to do like a tie-in, but they're not like the meat and potatoes.
Yeah. But I guess tying this back to Thor, like if there is one thing that I can say about Thor: Love and Thunder, is that it definitely reignited my excitement for Marvel going forward. Because as much as I liked some of the previous Marvel movies and some of the previous Marvel shows, like my takeaway from most of those are, oh, this is good. I look forward to seeing where these seeds like this is the first time I've had like real fun watching a Marvel movie. Like I'm sitting there in the theater, people are laughing, enjoying themselves. I had the weird like this is the first like I've caught up and been watching all the Marvel movies with my parents, and at no point during that time that I thought it was weird because like, oh, it just feels like another movie. Like I was sitting in the theater, I'm like, holy shit, I'm watching a Marvel movie with my parents. Like, right. And we're sitting there and we're laughing our asses off at goats screaming.
Yeah, no, it's really wonderful. I think there's just like there's a real charm and lovely kind of warmth to this movie, and like especially like I remember one of my biggest complaints about Marvel during maybe phase 2 or 3, or I don't fucking know how this shit works anymore, but like these movies have a history of having humor in them that feels a bit forced or like kind of awkward, or like a bunch of men in suits fucking came up with it. Like I don't know, but like I think Taika Waititi's brand and humor and style is so like it's so genuine that I think it really
Like,
translates into the movie.
Yeah. It's not just that. It's an actress like Chris Hemsworth as well. Like he's lapping it up every like second he's on the screen. You can tell that he's not fatigued. He has so much fun with his character and with
the
his
energy's
role.
perfect.
Like
Sorry, there was like we're waiting for each other, and also our webcams like got really slow. So I'll just say something. Speaking of actors looking like they're having a good time, I think Natalie Portman actually liked being in this one.
Yeah, no, that was another thing too. Like, I went into like when I saw the trailer, like, and I know like Mighty Thor was a thing that was in the comics, but when I see things like female Thor or like any sort of something that can be seen as like a potential like inclusive casting, like I get really scared that they're gonna sacrifice writing for the sake of inclusiveness. Like and I got some of this feeling with Captain Marvel, because it's not that there's anything wrong with inclusiveness. Like when you're not going in writing a story with the first thought of your mind is like, okay, what's this character thinking? What's this character doing? Do I understand who this person is? And writing an interesting story around them. You can get really weird priorities mixed up where a character can feel like weirdly out of character or doing something that wouldn't be acceptable IRL, but it's okay in the movie because they're a certain
I mean, I think it's
like within the context of the movie, like there are certain movies where like it's like, oh, anybody can do anything fucked up and it's okay. But then like in a Marvel movie, it's like, okay, like this is supposed to be like a superhero that everybody's supposed to root for and like. Jane's arc was so good. Like I thought it actually like worked for me. Like not only like setting it up with having it be like Mjolnir protecting her because Thor spoke to like her, like building that connection there, so it didn't feel like a cop out. Oh, suddenly a non-Asgardian who isn't a superhero.
They did it by they justified it by rescuing a storyline from previous MCU content.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I thought too.
It's such a monster show. It's a killing two birds with one stone. It's like,
but it's not just that. It thematically works into the whole idea of love and taking care of those that you care about. It's like this masterwork of the theme to both justify a non-human, like a non-Asgardian, non-superhero becoming superpowered. And fixing a past plot point that really didn't make any sense. Like I get like, okay, like them breaking up sort of makes sense given like how like away Thor was, but the way they broke up and the writing around that scene was kind of weird. Like,
yeah, well, it was an awkward kind of sidestep of the fact that Natalie Portman
it was almost made humorous. It was almost made humorous at that point.
They actually, like, just with like a montage and stuff, like they really fucking made me believe that those two characters had a connection and then squandered it because they were afraid. Which is also just a really humanizing thing and a relatable feeling as well. I think at the moment, like, I don't know, I'm in a relationship at the moment that I'm really happy with. But also, like, there's, of course, that comes with certain anxieties and fears, especially being long distance and stuff. And I feel like if you're in touch with that side of yourself, then, like, at least for me, like, I am so weak to stories that care about that shit. Like for me, the emotional weight of those two characters is like just effortlessly like engaging for me, and I'm right there in the themes.
It's not just that, like I've not only is it so relatable, like out of like over a decade of Marvel movies, it took the most outlandish. This is the most outlandish Marvel movie out of all of them. I would probably say, just in terms of production, humor. This movie did the best job at humanizing Thor. Like we've known him for over a decade. And he's had his moments where he's cared about his mother, or he's cared about his brother, or like he's had this like responsibility, but he was always just kind of like this goofy frat boy sort of person. To be able to like, for this movie just to come in and say he is like this because his like his heart is too big and he's afraid of abandonment, which like it does so much to craft, and then to feed that into his maturing and to eventually becoming this like father figure who's accepted, like who like one of the biggest things I was afraid of when they brought up the eternity thing and granting a wish. I was so afraid they were going to go down the route of Thor's going to wish that Jane Foster's cancer is going to be healed and she's going to recover and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because not that I necessarily think that wouldn't be that's necessarily like, wouldn't be a good idea, but giving the themes of the movie, like Thor needed to learn to, let go, you know? Like,
yeah, well,
Thor from Thor 1 would have done that given the opportunity. But like he accepted that he lost to Gore. He's like, Gore, like you can make your wish, but consider what you're going to wish for. And then he turns his attention to the person he cares about. Lets her go.
He sits in that moment. I like how like Thor has lost so much over the movies, and he's gone through so many heartbreaks and stuff, but this is the one where he's like the most ready to meet it as it happens. Like he's ready to grieve it, he's ready to understand what that is, because like I don't know, because of the emotional journey he's gone through, and how he realizes like what he needs and what's important to him. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And also the other thing about having that character actually die is that like it's kind of, I feel like it would be a slap in the face a little bit to people who actually have cancer to be like, oh well, Thor went to like a thing in the middle of the universe and wished it away. Like it adds that kind of level of reality to it, and I think for me the two tones of like, you know, funny joy of life and like crushing sadness of loss, or like they kind of need to both be there.
I genuinely think that people who go back to the movie, watch it a second time, and actually take appreciation to how carefully crafted the entire story was, would come to a new appreciation, because like it's not just Jane dying, it's her ending up in Valhalla. So much of this movie was like there's so much themes about accepting loss and having like that like death you earn and the death you deserve, that like the death you want to have and the death you deserve. And not only does Jane prove she's worthy, she gives her life on her own terms to save the person she loves, and she gets rewarded for it by going to Valhalla.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like you know what's interesting is like like we're like watching the credits. I was there with my friends and I was like, wait, don't you have to die in battle to go to Valhalla? And my friend Reese was like, well, yeah, she died battling cancer. And I was like, oh, that's...
No, but in a lot of ways, she gave her life in battle, like the battle, like it's kind of a bit weird because like earlier it's like, oh, like the battle was already over at that point, but in some ways the battle wasn't fully over at that point. Plus, she like I feel like there was like that whole Valhalla thing is more about the mentality around it. Like She
because she entered and fought, she died because it accelerated her cancer. So it's like she did die from the like I don't know, like as opposed to the other chick who was like lying in the snow waiting to die, kind of different.
Yeah, it's like she was waiting to die rather than the battle actually killing her. Like she could survive, where, and I'm guessing that's probably where the discrepancy, like, well, like the lies. But I was just like floored away with both the storytelling and like nothing felt mean-spirited in this movie. There's been a lot of Marvel in the past that has felt mean-spirited to some degree. Like just how much love was put into the movie, like, and sincerity.
Yeah,
And
and that's for me that's probably what elevates it beyond just being a funny movie. Like it's all there. But it is also very
Mhm.
funny. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. But and like
Yeah.
it's funny. I've really the last couple of Marvel movies I've seen. I really like them, and now I'm starting to think like, wait, am I
Did I like them?
basic?
No,
Like
it's don't
I
worry.
don't know, because it's kind of not cool to love Marvel movies, as
No,
like
it's weird
and
because
I'm
like
not gonna say that they're like fucking super high art or anything, but like I just
you
think
know,
they're
but
fucking
I
good.
but it's weird because I said like I watched all these Marvel movies when I like with my parents. I went to the theater when I was like in school, feeling embarrassed about watching the Marvel movies. I think my parents were just there going like, just taking their kids to the theater. And now it's
Yeah,
like I look forward to going to the movie theater with my parents to watch Marvel movies. I enjoy going upstairs, watching whatever Disney Plus show, even if they're mediocre. Um, or like watching through
there's
ages.
something comfortable about them. They're always fun and inventive, and like
But
I don't know, I
it's
just leave Marvel stuff
it is
feeling good.
it is the same appeal as a long running serialized TV show. It's comforting.
Hmm.
It's familiar. It's safe. It's a long, especially when it's so expensive to go to the theaters. It's a ritual. It's a time commitment to go. It's like to
Yeah,
go there. And it's the
but
same
I
thing. Like
know that I want to see a Marvel movie.
it's like there's so much like even like with like the Disney Plus shows or if you watch them in like Agents of Shield, it's like there is so much media out there that it's so hard. It's very hard to whittle down just like the things you want to watch or like feel motivated to watch. I think because there's such a it's so overwhelming. But you will
Hmm.
like no matter if you're left wanting more from a Marvel movie, there's always something impressive in there. You'll always have a laugh while watching a Marvel movie. Like I complain about something like Captain Marvel. I didn't hate Captain Marvel. There are things I liked a lot about Captain Marvel. Like the
Hmm.
I really enjoy Captain Marvel as a Nick Fury movie. There's a lot of good in there. Like it's not my favorite. I think it's not as good as a lot of the other Marvel movies, but it's still a really
Hmm.
good movie. you know, I,
You know what
I
this how I kind of view Marvel movies a little bit. Um, a movie I recently rewatched was a Ratatouille. Um, and like when the critic like eats the Ratatouille at the end, it's like it might not be the most like fucking fanciful, extravagant, high cuisine thing ever, but when he eats it, it's like makes him remember a simpler time as a child and his mom making him the food. Like I think there's that kind of wholesome quality to
yeah,
Marvel stuff, where
I
it's like
definitely
it's like it's just it's nice.
yeah, and I do think that there's something like you grow attached to these characters and you want to see where they're gonna go and they're gonna grow. Like you want to see where these stories progress because that's just not a movie experience you have generally speaking. Um, like you don't get a lot of long serialized movie series, and
No.
what makes Marvel unique in that front is because it's a cinematic universe. You're not just following, oh, this is the next year of this character's life. There's a lot of variety, and maybe not everything impacts everything. Maybe it's a bit silly that, like, oh, like not every like superhero pops up in every superhero movie like you'd expect. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe is never putting out the same thing twice. Like
Hmm.
it's always interesting enough to capture your attention, but familiar enough to make you feel like it's a safe watch or
Hmm.
comforting or relatable. Like,
Well, I feel like that's kind of a nice sentiment to end off
yeah,
on. Like I could go into detail about a bunch of scenes and moments that I liked in Thor, but I feel like the gist of my opinion is out there. Um,
I feel like Thor as a whole just kind of like stands on its own. Like it's such a I feel like it's such a tightly put together movie that if we start talking about any individual thing, it'll just be like, oh, it's like this because this, or like
mm,
there's so many great details in the movie, but those great details tie back to it's just a very well. Like I think it's one of the probably the best thematically told Marvel movies.
Hmm.
like in a long
Yeah, I
while.
can agree that everything serves one purpose pretty well. Well,
Yeah, like where a lot of other movies Marvel movies can feel like fan servicey or superfluous. This is it didn't feel that way watching it, but that might just be me.
well, let us know your thoughts on Thor 4, the 4 in the comments. And why you think the MCU is going to shit, and you're gonna
And
sell
why our
all your
opinions are
Funko
wrong.
Pops. Yeah. Uh, this has been Bros in the Landfill, signing off. Boop, 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 boop.